This podcast is brought to you by Citadel. This must you see.
Will you please listen up to what I have to say? Cause we're in for some old-fashioned wrestling today. Not the violent, oily, opposerish kind, but the kind that involves pins and thumbs you will find. Cause it's thumb wrestling time. Yes, it's thumb wrestling time. So we will discuss pros and cons, faults and pluses of all your favorite movies. And we will ponder the merits of cinema in this WrestleMania. Cause it's thumb wrestling time. Yes, it's thumb wrestling time. Yes, it's thumb wrestling time.
Hello, pot people.
Wow!
That is from Invasion of the Body Snatchers. You are listening to a brand new episode of Thumb Wrestling, the podcast in which two movie opinions collide and merge into one fun chat. This is episode Fear Street 1994, episode VHS 94. My name is Ruud Vos and I will be your host. And we have a nice little show in store for you. A return to a director that we haven't talked about since the very first episode, Paul Thomas Anderson. We'll discuss his 2017 movie Phantom Thread, which to this day still has the last movie performance by Daniel Day-Lewis. He plays Reynolds Woodcock, a British fashion designer in the 1950s. He is very job-obsessed and not the nicest man, and it's usually his sister Cyril, who's also his business partner, who gets rid of the girl who he gets bored of. Then, on a day off, he finds new romance with a waitress called Alma, played by Vicky Creeps. She quickly becomes his muse and finds out about his toxicity. But also, she's not deterred by it. Instead, she only tries to get a bigger hold of him. And she finds that what Woodcock really needs sometimes is a period of cooling down, which she sort of forces by poisoning him with mushrooms. It's during periods of sickness and vomiting that he seems to grow back in love with her. In the end, he finds out what she's doing to him and happily bites down on another mushroom. End of movie. For some people, like me, this is another lovely twisted tale from the mind of Paul Thomas Anderson. For some fans of P.T.A, though, it can be the one that didn't take. And that is the case for Barb, who is the head programmer of the Leiden Shorts Film Festival, which is held from the 9th to the 12th of June this year. You can go, amongst other places, to Het Kijkhuis to watch a big conglomeration of lovely shorts, which are handpicked by Barb and their team. We had a tough time finding a movie to talk about in a Zoom conversation on the 14th of May, partly because Barb just simply has great taste. So, well, let's go to the conversation about Phantom Thread immediately. Well, okay, first this.
Show me the money.
Hey, do you like this podcast? Well, this podcast likes you too, just for listening to it. Even if you're a casual listener. But if you like to be liked, you can be liked even more by donating a small monthly sum of money to us on Patreon. And if you do, you get rewards to show you how much we like you. What am I saying? How much we love you. So visit patreon.com/duimpjeworstelen and get even more warm feelings. And even if you don't, no worries. Thank you simply for listening.
3, 2, 1, fight!
I'm curious, what is your mini review of Phantom Thread? What is this movie to you?
Yeah. Phantom Thread is the only film by Paul Thomas Anderson that I do not like. I think it's a film that on several accounts disappointed me. The first is the very story, like following a very toxic relationship between a genius artist who is excused of being awful because he's a genius, and his muse is like, again, like I feel like I've seen that a ton of times. And then it's a film that's so well made from all points of like the cinematography, that like everything is so perfect that you can't really like get involved with it. I felt a lot of distance. Like it's so perfect. It felt like I watched something beautiful, but like where could I get in? Where could I feel things? Where was I supposed to be surprised? Or like it's not happening. I'm just there watching something that's perfect. I'm like, okay, sure, great.
Now, I was wondering where you were going with everything was so perfectly made, because it also could turn into like an argument for it feels like such a waste. Why put that on this story?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say it feels like a waste, because, I mean, obviously, but it feels a bit like he was trying to make a film to show that he was so in control of everything. And he's obviously extremely in control of his craft. Like, I have no doubt in my mind about this. But it feels a bit disappointed because before that, he was kind of playing with aesthetics. He was playing with the flaw either of the character or of, like, the scenes themselves. So you could really feel something that was tangible, kind of that you could grasp and get into. And with this film, it's like perfectly one layer awesomeness of great images, great cinematography, great everything, and it's kind of overwhelming to some extent as well, I think.
Maybe a bit too measured.
Yeah. Usually goes a bit crazy, and this felt like very in control.
And then now he's made Licorice Pizza. Does that feel like he got his groove back?
Yes. Yes. When I went to the movies, I was like, please don't disappoint me again. I have so much faith in you. And then we get those characters that are so strange and the narration is so odd. We don't know where we're going. We don't know what to expect. And then we were back in LA as well, which just feels like it's his place. Like he has a relationship with that city that just works. And in Phantom Thread, we're in the UK for the first time. We're also in the 50s. It just felt kind of out of touch with what usually does, which can be great for a filmmaker. Like, go explore, do things, but kind of disappointing them.
You didn't feel this one.
Yeah.
So when you're going into Licorice Pizza and you're going a bit like, I've been hurt before, please don't do it again.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Does it feel like you're in kind of a bit of a same sort of relationship with Paul Thomas Anderson as a director-viewer as the relationship in Phantom Thread?
Ooh. That's
Maybe you wouldn't go that far.
No, I mean, those characters in Phantom Thread, it's so toxic. Like, honestly, watching this relationship, you're like, this is bad. Like, you guys should not be together. So no, because I want to be with Anderson at times. But their relationship is so intense and kind of uncomfortable at times. You're like, oh my God, what is going on with this? So I think that's the main.
But what you said about it being so perfect, so measured, that was my word, but still, that's my interpretation of what you said. I would say that it does fit the world that he's building in Phantom Thread and the story he is telling with it. So maybe it's more that it amplifies the story that you're not very interested in to a degree that's even more not interesting.
I see what you mean. So it's a very good point. Like, the character is extremely rigid about everything. So having a film that also kind of feels rigid in its narration and in this creation as a whole makes sense. Like I absolutely get that. It does match, I think, absolutely. But it doesn't leave space for the audience to insert themselves in it and kind of it feels like everything is kind of said and done. Like, we have access to kind of everything. We can't at no moment can we go in there and be like, oh, maybe I read this wrong, or maybe I'm not aware of certain things up to the end, which I believe is insanely good. And I wish it came so much earlier in the film. It's like, I think that's the one scene where I'm like, yes, finally. and then it's over.
That's interesting because to me also the ending is very much what makes this film for me.
Yeah, fair enough.
But it's interesting that up till that point you've been going like almost like, "Oh, why more of this?"
Yeah, a bit.
And then that sort of, at least that sends you away with a feeling like, okay, well, at least the ending was cool.
Yeah, thank God the ending was cool. But it's kind of the moment where you're like, oh, they've both acknowledged the toxicity of everything. Like they're aware, all the cards are on the table. And I wish we could explore this. I feel like that's the type of relationship that would be so interesting to look at. Whereas everything that comes before it, it leads up to it, obviously, like absolutely no problem with that. But I just wish we cut that beginning chase by half the time, had this scene in the middle. And then the second half is exploring those people with a deeply problematic relationship with each other, but are aware of it. That would be, I think, very interesting. Like that's one of the things I would change about this film if I had any sort of power over it. It's
a very weird thing that, like, when you're acknowledging your toxicity to each other, that's the point where you go, "Aww."
Yeah, that. Maybe I am deeply troubled to some extent, but I feel like in all of his film up to there, Anderson, like the characters are awful. They're aware they're awful. They keep doing awful things to each other, but that's kind of the point of finding some human traits within those deeply flawed and highly kind of fake, because nobody's really like this in real life, like kind of fake tropes of character. And here it's kind of the reverse. It's like they are deeply real, like people like this, like these characters feel deeply real, but because they're so real, then we feel very distant from them. I don't know if I explained that right. It feels like kind of the reverse psychology thing.
There's a thing in lots of Anderson's films where the people that he draws, that despite that they are sometimes really terrible to each other and to the world at large, that there is a sense of fun of being with them. Like you could be friends with them even though they're pretty shitty.
Absolutely.
In some respects.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that doesn't feel like it's very present here, no.
Yeah, no, you don't. I'd be terrified of Reynolds. It would terrify me. I would probably cry in the corner if he said anything to me. He has some very hard punchlines that are, I think, deeply funny, but also very harsh. You hear them and you're like, oh, wow. Like, you have no boobs. Okay. You have no taste. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. just these jabs just out of nowhere.
Very
and the "you have no boobs" doesn't even seem to be a jab. That's just him just assessing her at that point. And well, he does like that, so it's not meant as a. This is just him observing what he sees, but you just see that it immediately just claws into her insecurity.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
You see her face just change there, even though she's trying to remain composed. But that's really well acted by Vicky Krieps, I think.
Yeah, the acting is, and I can't take that away from them. It's brilliant. I mean, Day-Lewis, knowing that he does method acting, it means he was probably very awful to everyone around him for a couple of weeks. But I mean, for the sake of the craft, it is a brilliant performance. Can take that away from either of them, really.
Yeah, apparently Vicky Krieps even referred to Lewis as Reynolds' way into promoting the film because she was so used to just calling him that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Well, he hasn't acted since, right? David.
No, this was the one where he said, "I'm quitting acting for the so manyth time," and this time up till now he has held his word, kept his promise. So we'll see who is the next one to try and lure him out into a role. Will it be Martin Scorsese again, or?
Let's see.
Because he'd quit acting back then, and then Martin Scorsese said, "Hey, I'm making Gangs of New York. Want to come back?"
Yeah, so I think if the project is there, maybe. But if it ends up being his last performance, then he definitely did a brilliant job. Can't take that away from him.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
It's not a question of this movie was so shitty. I'm glad he stopped. This perfect point. Just never come back, please.
No. Yeah.
So, what was the first time you saw this film?
When I saw this movie for the first time.
It was at the beginning of the pandemic, actually. I had seen a lot of his film prior to that, but it was actually one that I was kind of pushing back all the time. For some reason, I didn't want to see it. I couldn't motivate myself. And maybe that's why I was so disappointed as well. It's because I didn't want to see it, but then when I forced myself to do it, I was hoping that it would prove me wrong, and it didn't.
Yeah.
So maybe there's that.
I could sort of get that because I also didn't think that the kind of story that he would be telling with it would be it wasn't very alluring to me in principle. It's just that the thing that got me to go to the cinema was, well, it is Paul Thomas Anderson working with Daniel Day-Lewis again, so how bad can it be?
Yeah, no, I get that. So yeah, I watched it in early 2020, and I remember having a conversation with my mom and being like, "Oh, have you seen that one?" She was like, "Yeah, I did." And she was like, "I was very bored," and my mother really likes slow films and such. So I was like, "Oh my goodness, what happened? What happened, Paul? What did you do?" Yeah. So yeah, I watched it and was a bit disappointed. Maybe on a bigger screen with the ambience in the room and such, maybe I would have felt differently. But watching it by myself on my laptop, I had a very hard time, keeping my attention up. The story wasn't engaging me. I was like, no, please. I really wanted to like it, and it didn't want me to like it. That was very annoying. It was very frustrating.
Yeah. How did you like Johnny Greenwood's score?
I do really like it. I think it's very well done, but it can also be a bit too much at times. I feel like some scenes could have benefited from silence to really build the tension, because the music was kind of like telling me what to feel. Like it would go into a very kind of distorted thing, and I'd be like, okay, I'm supposed to feel discomfort here. Whereas maybe if it had been silent, I would have assessed that by myself. But I think it's like the fourth.
I sort of get what you mean,
film
but
with Greenwood, right?
I think so. Let's see, The Master.
There Will Be Blood, I think.
Inherent Vice.
Yeah, a bit overwhelming, this music, I'd say. Like at times, even though it's beautiful, it's definitely one of those soundtracks that you can also listen to without watching the movie. Like it's something you can definitely get back to listen to it as an album, and it's brilliant. But a bit overwhelming. I don't know if you agree with that.
I get what you mean. Although I did have like this feeling like this is the soundtrack that I've heard of him that sounds really the most romantic, even though it's about a very toxic romance, of course. But it also at times just pushes into the romance part, even though you're not really seeing the romance at that point.
Absolutely. No, I do agree. Like there's some scenes that do feel like they're exactly like it's really trying to manipulate your emotions, and sometimes on the opposite of what you would have perceived had you had just the images. So in one sense, it's very well used. But again, it's so perfect, so well done that you don't have space to be you as an audience, you know? Like you're kind of always put back in your place of like, you're supposed to feel this. And then in your brain, you're like, this is not romantic. Like the way you guys are looking at each other feels very off, very wrong.
This movie has like a very drawn out way of telling its story. At least it takes its time to set the pieces and build stuff up, and then it's still very measured and sort of static to watch. So it feels like sort of the antithesis of short films.
Absolutely.
Would you say so?
To some extent, yes, absolutely. I mean, short films are very, like, they're snippets. They're about making a story about a character. You're introduced to them here and there. You have 15 minutes to follow whatever is going on. So it's very condensed, but it's also very efficient. You don't have time to really make everything lengthy and like. I mean, some shorts absolutely do that. They're all about just like the atmosphere. You're in a room and they just give you images and a very basic storyline, and it's going to last 30 minutes. I usually don't like those, but there is some. But that's true that it's really the format to explore like moments, snippets, and like just one aspect of a relationship. Like it's very efficient in that aspect, which obviously is not the case. With that film, and I think actually it would, some scenes in themselves could make, if like condensed in a way, could actually make a very interesting short.
I was just going to say, especially the first time we see Woodcock having breakfast with his sister and his first girlfriend.
Absolutely.
That could have been a short film.
I think it absolutely would have been an option. Like it's some scenes are really impactful and just that, like, just that strong. So everything that's kind of drawn out in between feels a bit sometimes I wouldn't say unnecessary in the sense that, like, obviously it's part of the film. We're not going to take things away, but some scenes feels like they're there to show beauty and measure again, to really add to that like very grandiose thing that is that film.
Or also this scene with Julia Davis where she's sort of feeding lines to Woodcock, like, "Ooh, she's not watched you at all this evening," while she's talking to the doctor. Yes. It's also one of these things where there are a lot of moving pieces, and you just see so economically well how everything is placed and phrased and set up, where you sort of see a world, just a shift in a world within one scene.
Yes, no, that's right. I hadn't paid that close attention, but that is true that some scenes really have this very impactful, like for 10 minutes, or extremely manage to create a contained world that you can just watch unfold just there for a short amount of time. That's very true.
I also just love seeing Julia Davis in this because I know her as a British comedian with a very, very, very dark streak. And she is amazing at just playing an awful cunt, to put a phrase to it. And she does it so well in here. Like, she's feeding her own brand of poison to Woodcock.
Yeah.
Mental poison.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm not very familiar with our previous work, so I kind of seeing it as it is in the film itself. Yeah. I kind of really like the dichotomy between her and Alma, in the sense that they're I mean, again, it's two women pitted against each other. Classic. Do you need that in film? I don't know. That's another debate. But they're...
I would say, she's sort of like a shadow version of Alma.
Yeah, like they're always kind of... I don't know, that the interaction between them is also very interesting. Actually, sometimes more interesting to witness than their respective interaction with Reynolds, I'd say. Like, there's something deeply... I think because they're also both of them are very aware, and Reynolds is very self-centered. So sometimes he's very unaware of what's going on, and he has moments where he is, but it feels very inwards. And both these women are very much aware of him and the world they're in, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting from the very first scene where you see him working with dresses, and you have Gina McKee, also a British actress, she plays a countess, and I've seen her in some other films like In the Loop. But there's this, she is wearing his dress that he made for her. And when they're having an interaction, she tries to get his attention. She's staring at him all the time, very closely, very intently, and he just keeps looking at the dress. He gets very close to her when it's almost intimate, but he's not getting intimate with her. He's getting intimate with the dress.
I agree.
And only when he gets Alma in there, then he starts interacting with a person. So that was a very cool detail, I thought.
Yeah.
And a very good emphasis in the acting. But every time you have a woman in there, they're just trying to especially get Reynolds' attention, because they think if they get his attention, they get better dresses, even though for him, clearly, that's not the case.
Yeah, that's very, I think that's one thing that's very interesting in this film, is the kind of the sensual aspect. The touch, the taste, etc., is always very oriented towards things and not people. Like, Reynolds is obsessed with how the fabric looks and how it feels and how it falls. He's obsessed with food, the way they taste, how things pair together, etc. Like, he's really obsessed with things and again, it's like he hyper fixate on stuff, but not the big picture of the world around him at all times. That's like, it really is no awareness whatsoever of like, you can't read the room, basically. He's really oriented towards all those things and all those.
No, he doesn't care about the room. If it's up to him, he is the room.
It's true. He commands attention, though, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
Commands attention. But yeah. But yeah, going back to like the sensuality thing, I do personally think that there's a film that is very sensorial but lacks sensuality.
You also mentioned before that you thought that things were funny.
Yeah.
And this second time watching, I really sort of viewed it as a comedy. I didn't necessarily the first time. Of course, I got that there were jokey things in there, but now I saw more comedy and even just very small gestures and stuff like that. The first time I just absorbed as story things. Mm-hmm. I was chuckling half out loud in the train back from Amsterdam yesterday.
Yeah, there's some funny lines, especially when I think one that really made me laugh out loud is when he looks at her and he goes like, "I'm extremely hungry," and you're like,
"Yeah,
sir, where did that come from?" Yeah, no, there's some like lines that come out and you're like, okay, that's interesting. I wish there were actually more. That kind of adds a layer to his character, which I think would make it even more interesting.
Just the whole coupling of food and love in this movie is already quite a funny thing, and is being played out in some time. At some point, he's had about enough to eat, and then she asks him, "Are you thirsty?"
Yeah.
And then they go up to the room, and
there's like some nice little innuendo.
You just see this look in his face just change, going, "Oh,
yeah, no, it's
boom chicka wow wow."
No, it's very it's quite a. I think a big part actually of the humor lies in those conversation about food, and then in his like directness, which is usually quite mean, but it's also. If you see it as a dark comedy, you're like, oh, that's funny as well. Like, to go back when he's like measuring her and making comments about her body, you're not necessarily. I don't think before that you've seen him being so direct, and then he makes all those comments, and you're like, oh, okay. Very well.
Oh,
surprised.
He has a nasty streak.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think that. I mean, his character, the way he's built and layered, has those moments where like, oh, you're more interesting than I thought you were.
Yeah.
But usually, it does drop a bit. Like, it's not necessarily a consistent like. It doesn't throw surprises at you very often. It's like very snippets that you need to grab, and if it's kind of blink and you'll miss it. If you don't pay attention to one scene, you won't.
And sometimes it's just a way of how he phrases it, or just the way he looks, or something like that.
Absolutely.
That just adds the humor to it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And also Leslie Manville, she can be really funny in this movie, especially when she starts ganging up against Woodcock with. She's Cyril, the sister.
Yeah.
But her very measured, her very correct, cold delivery, sometimes it becomes really funny, for me at least. Especially like in one of the first scenes with Alma at breakfast, when she's explaining stuff to Alma, how stuff works. She has a slight hint of sarcasm in there.
Yeah, I do see what you mean. Like, I think it goes back again to all those women being very aware of the situations and how to put themselves in situations and how to like kind of behave and be so that their relationship with Reynolds is maintained. I feel like to stay in his circle, they have become extremely aware of what's going on, and then they've learned how to kind of manipulate the scene. And I mean, with Cyril, it's extremely obvious throughout the entire film that she knows her brother like perfectly. Like she knows exactly where to push, where not to push. Like she knows, and Alma needs to learn that. And that's true that in some moments her comments are also little jabs that come that are funny. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, it seems like she and Woodcock really had to fight themselves into the systems that they are a part of, and that has sort of turned them a bit mean, a bit direct, a bit let's say entitled even. Yeah.
I mean, for a while I had not realized that, and then there's that comment where they say, "Oh, this lady is paying for the house," and that's when I was like, "Oh,
Barbara Rose."
Yeah, what an awful character. It's like no, that's the comment where I was like, "Oh, okay, so they're not originally from that world," and I had not figured that out before because they are so good at performing as high class society, and then we realize that they're absolutely not. And I think
it's like when you're a convert, you're more rigid in the thing that you're trying to blend in, and that's very much what they're doing as well.
Yeah, no, that's exactly. That's what you see. That's one of the things that I was a bit surprised by, and then once you know, you're like, okay, that's fair. Like they were trying so hard to stay there.
And inside, they probably still feel like they're an outsider in a different world.
Yeah, or an imposter of some kind. Like that probably would explain why Reynolds is also so harsh with himself. When he looks at stuff and is like, "Oh, that's not very good. That's ugly." And you're like, "Okay, that's harsh even for you." so yeah, they probably do have this kind of imposter syndrome or like class complex, which I think would make sense in the 50s. That's so
very much so.
Like so strong in their, I guess, subconscious to some extent. Yeah.
Well, a boy's best friend is his podcast.
So, Barbara Rose.
Yeah, what a character!
What a scene stealer!
The moment she arrived and you see her in those stairs. Suddenly you're like, what is going on with you?
Yeah.
She's
played by Harriet Sansom Harris, an actress who's done loads and loads of small bit parts all around, a very hard-working actress, but one who's never taken the big limelight. Yeah. But this one, and in Licorice Pizza, both times, steals scenes.
She is
just wow.
Brilliant. She's brilliant because instantly you both dislike her and kind of pity her because you can feel that something went terribly wrong at some point and you feel so sorry.
Yes, a very alcoholic rich woman who's just can't keep anything together.
Absolutely. Like she's a mess. Like, let's be very honest. But I think that it's actually one of my favorite character in this whole film because it's the only one that I felt empathy towards. And then like, you know, you look at her and you're like, you're a mess. You're doing a terrible job at life, so it seems. And your poor son looks extremely embarrassed by your presence. So I
but also, like, he can't do anything about it. He's powerless. Exactly. He's a very powerless little entity.
Yeah, exactly.
Can't do.
But at the same time, you're like, for some reason, she's the one that shows the most vulnerability and humanity in the very few things. Like when she's putting on that dress and you can see she's on the brink of tears, like, I'm so ugly. I know you're doing your best, but I'm so ugly. It's really in those moments where you're like, like there's a real human in that very alcoholic body, which with the other characters is kind of like masked. Their emotions are very masked, and with her it's just all out. It's like,
yeah, and when she shows her humanity, when she's funneling the collar of her dress, and you just see just Woodcock just resisting everything with that, just being very strict to her.
Yeah.
But I also like that scene because it also shows that Alma can bring out the worst in Woodcock when they align as well, not just when they're opposing forces, but when they align, they're even worse together.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted them, once they acknowledged their toxicity, that's what I wanted to see. I wanted them to be awful together and stop pretending. I was like, be awful. Just embrace the awfulness. Because you get snippets of like them being like very bad people. And I wish we would see more of that. And not
you sound a bit like the Emperor addressing Luke, like, embrace
the awfulness. No, that's true. Like, I don't know. That's something I think would be unexpected and kind of, I don't know. I think it's very interesting. And that's something that Anderson is so good at, is putting you with very bad people and making you like them. Yeah. And here they kind of alternate at being like moments of... Yeah. She's good, he's bad, and then they alternate and stuff. And then we get snippets where they align as very cute together or very bad together. And you're like, oh, that's cool. And then it goes away until the end. It's like, oh, big reveal. Ta-da.
It's interesting that you do turn into, that you more turn into that. It's also maybe one of the most fun scenes, especially when he goes, I'm going to get the dress back.
Yeah. I wasn't expecting that, and I was expecting it in the sense that you're like they want to keep the brand, and they're ganging up against this poor woman who's obviously having a terrible time. But the fact that they actually go through with it is it's quite violent as a scene. It feels a bit, I don't know.
And then the sun turns up again, and Woodcock just goes, "Oh, hi, Cal."
Yeah, that's one of the funny things as well. And you can see the poor boy being absolutely terrified. Like all of us would probably be like, oh my God, he's gonna say something, he's gonna do something.
And probably inside he's going like, I don't like you funneling my mother, but yeah, fair enough.
It's kind of like, I'm not gonna say anything. Like the way he enters and leaves the scene is very good comedic timing.
So, if you like that, did you also enjoy Woodcock telling the doctor to fuck off?
Yeah, that's also one of those where, like, he's so very... I mean, I wouldn't say polite, because there is not so much politeness in this man, but he's kind of, like, socially acceptable. And then, I told you to go fuck up, like, go fuck yourself, or whatever he says. And you're like...
Yeah.
High society in the Alps during Christmas time, you would not. You would not. That poor doctor, actually. He's the one that she's telling the whole story to, right?
Yeah.
You must walk out of this house and be like, those people are truly effed up. Like they are not.
You don't completely get a sense when she's telling the story to him. It seems just like a separate thing from the whole story. It's not like it's tied into the whole telling. It's probably at the end when the doctor comes to visit him, and she just explains, well, I've poisoned him, but he's okay with it.
That's her thing. Which is...
Yeah.
Okay, that's your thing, guys. Fair enough. But I would say that's then, like, he's resting upstairs and she's telling the whole story, so you see it unfold. But that poor doctor must be so very confused and deeply traumatized by this couple.
After the first encounter where Reynolds has told him to fuck off, he goes, well, I've seen weirder, I've seen worse, I've been through the shit, and then he gets into this mess. That must be something.
You wanted more? Here it is. Let's see. A deeply disturbing couple, I'd say.
I've heard it more than once. I've heard it suggested, but it's not exactly text of the movie. The suggestion that Cyril could be a queer character, that she's not married because she might feel more attracted to women, and she does seem to feel a certain bond with Alma, as if she's almost as appreciative of her as Reynolds, even though she knows she can't act on it.
I wish I had seen that. I'm usually quite good at being like, oh, that is queer. That's queer subtext.
I'm not exactly sure that it's true. It's just something that I've heard people suggest, and I thought, well, it could be.
I mean, let's not rule it out. That could definitely be an option, especially, I mean, at the time in the 50s, an unmarried woman is very...
But there's another aspect to that sort of makes me think, I hope it's not the case. Okay. Because at some point, Reynolds tells the story about that wedding dress that he made, and that there is a big sense of superstition about wedding dresses. And if you wear them, maybe you will never get married. And then his sister modeled the wedding dress for him, and she never got married.
Yeah,
that's sort of there's an idea in there that their bond is so strong that there's an implication that she made an ultimate sacrifice for her brother. That she went that far, the prospect of maybe never getting married, just so his brother could make a dress.
I feel like that's more what I read. It feels more like it's a woman that kind of sacrificed everything, that also took kind of the motherly place that because his grief is probably what made him so rigid and like willing to be in control of everything. So I think she took over that kind of motherly position and sacrificed her life for a brother in that sense, because at many points she could also, in a more sisterly way, tell him to like go to hell, like, because he's truly being awful, which is something that siblings usually do to each other. Like when your sibling is annoying, you just straight up say it usually. And here she's kind of like
usually you slap each other, but that's my experience with siblings.
Okay, well, we didn't go to that extent with mine, but it was usually like, if you're being awful, I'm going to tell you you're awful. And here she's kind of like...
Well, I had an older brother, so that doesn't help this comparison.
Fair enough. But yeah, she feels very like she's always kind of comforting him in his position. Like when they're doing the first one of the dress, they're trying out one of the dress, and Alma is like, I don't like it. Like I don't think it's the right fabric. And the sister Cyril is obviously aware that it's not the thing to say, and she might agree or disagree. We never know, but she decides to go in the direction that Reynolds wants her to.
No, her role is to support her brother.
It's always like support and like protection and telling people like to adapt to her brother and not the other way around. So there's that.
I do think that mother role is also there in the way she interacts with Alma, like or not necessarily with Alma, but also about Alma. When she tells Woodcock, for instance, like, I'm very fond of her. That's a thing that a mother-in-law could say. Yeah,
that's true. It's like, I approve of your
but also decision. Like, please don't be shitty to her because it's not her fault that you're
awful.
Not that interested in her. That's it. Like, I love you, and I will accept any shitty thing you do, but just please don't be too shitty to her.
Yeah, which turns out not really. But I think she really has this very protective motherly figure, which I think is what, when Alma comes and eventually starts to become stronger and like more assertive of who she is, I think that's what threatens Cyril as well, is that she can see that Alma is becoming the more motherly person within Reynolds' life. I think, through poisoning him, just a bit problematic in itself, twice of the matter. But like, I think that's the only moments where we can see Cyril being a bit uncomfortable, kind of like losing her grounds, is in those moments where we can see Alma becoming what she was to Reynolds.
I'm serious, and don't call me Shirley.
It's a bit of the legend of this movie that Paul Thomas Anderson thought up the story when he was sick, and his wife Maya Rudolph gave him a look of love that he felt like he hadn't seen her give him in years. So she figured, love through caring in sickness. That's a good theme.
Poor Maya being like, you've never looked at me like this in years. Like, this is so evil. I mean, that definitely, I think it has been explored in quite a bit of cinema before. Like this, building a relationship with one of the parties is like unable to do anything. Like
but like Intouchable.
Yeah, for instance, that one is such a cute story. But yeah, like there's a lot of films that have this relationship. Like one of them is kind of invalid, either temporary or forever, and the other, the caring person. That's really how they bond.
I think a better comparison is maybe De Rouille et d'Eau.
That's a good film as well, and it's very sad.
Yeah,
very good performances as well there. But no, there's like, it's something that has been explored. So I do understand the desire to make a film about this again, especially, and it's what's so very interesting with all the films is usually the person who ends up being sick was or is extremely strong, independent, and then suddenly they have no choice but to show vulnerability. What's interesting in this film is that to show vulnerability, it's not like a sickness that comes out of nowhere. It's she literally pushes the vulnerability on him so that he can only lie flat.
Yeah, the very first time that he is sort of, so overstrained that he needs some time to rest. The thing that inspires her in the end to feed him poisonous mushrooms. That is a bit different, but it's also a very interesting way of letting her get the idea. And the scene where she first goes to pick mushrooms is right after that. So the connection is also made quite quickly. At least they're coupled. They're not necessarily the same thing to start with, but that the feeding of poisonous mushrooms comes from that.
Yes.
Is made very,
very
logical. Very acceptable from the pairing of those two scenes.
I think that's one very strong thing, and maybe slightly annoying thing this film, is that narratively it's very clear. We can very easily understand the motivation of each character one after the other, and like get like that. I think it's in that sense one of a very accessible film, in the sense that it doesn't take you too much involvement as an audience to understand what's going on, which is probably what bothered me in the end. Just like, let me imagine things, but here it's like very extremely well structured narratively in the scenes. The editing is very well done to convey everything that needs to be kind of said out loud.
If you see that this film is sandwiched in between Inherent Vice, a movie that's so complicated with what it wants to tell that most people just tuned out during it. Just thought, I don't know what this movie is about. I don't care anymore. And then you have Licorice Pizza, which also has like some people really liking it, but loads of people, at least reactions that I've heard, that they think, well, I just don't quite get why these two are together, why they're drawn to each other, which I think makes it more interesting.
Absolutely. It's like, we don't understand what's your move, what's your next. I mean, in Inherent Vice, it's so drug induced. You're like, you've done LSD by proxy, kind of. But in Licorice Pizza, it's what makes it so interesting as a film is that both characters are extremely complex, are very odd balls of humans, and all their interaction, like how they weave the story with each other but also separately, is what is so interesting, because there is a lot of unsaid, of things that are unsaid, things that we don't see or that we don't get, and it's up to us to kind of either accept that we don't get it or make up whatever we think. It gives us so much freedom.
And they're also kind of movies that move from big scene to big scene, like they're almost a collection of shorts after each other, with vignettes. that bleed into each other very much so, but it can also be watched separately, probably.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we can kind of see at times that Paul Thomas Anderson started with shorts or had shorts that he then extended to films, which was the case for Boogie Night and Hard 8. I think both of those films come from shorts, and we can kind of see that that's how it visualizes things, how he structures a story, so that it comes from a scene, and then he tries to branch out of all the many different directions that this scene could provide. But the scene in itself could be alone. It could just stand out as it is. I mean, Licorice Pizza is very obvious. Like the whole mattress ordeal could just be a tiny little snippet, or the story where they're about to go to Bradley Cooper's house and setting up the thing, and then they get into that whole problem with the van in itself. Could also be a self-contained, very comedic show. Like there's a lot of.
I've gone on record that I'm not a fan of Bradley Cooper.
I can understand that.
But the man is on a hot streak right now. And one of the main exponents of that is him as John Peters, as a real figure, and just exploding into your face with awfulness.
I love that. So good. And also I could it kind of came out of nowhere in the sense that it's not necessarily like, that's also what's interesting with Anderson's films, that some of his scenes could be extracted. Like this scene in itself, he could have taken it away, put something else instead. It's fine. It's just a snippet of like an act within the film. But this one comes out of nowhere, and then you have Bradley Cooper going absolutely feral, and you're like, okay, I'm here for this. I'm here for this type of actions. Like, go ahead, Bradley. Go crazy. Have fun.
Yeah.
So,
and it ends with the truck bit, which is just an amazing piece of cinema. Yeah. That's just Paul Thomas Anderson showing, look how I can build tension with just action in just a couple of minutes, and it's so awesome. Yeah, no,
it was really brilliant. I was very happy when I walked out of that room. Most of the people looked very sad, so maybe they had the reverse effect. They loved Phantom Thread, and they were like, what is this? Licorice Pizza Hill.
Maybe.
But oh God, preferred that way.
Well, Phantom Thread was a pretty successful movie at the time.
It got so many, critics were going insane over it. Like it got nominated.
Yeah, but also financially, it was pretty successful. Somehow it drew people into the cinema. Yeah. Maybe it's the Oscar buzz, but
I mean, there's always the Oscar buzz. But even I was looking on IMDb, kind of the ratings of each of his films, and that's true that it's one of his highest. I think it's after There Will Be Blood, but it's one of his highest rated films, so people really liked it. But that might come from the fact that it is quite an accessible film, both aesthetically and narratively. It might be that, or the Oscar buzz.
Or maybe people are just fan of Daniel Day-Lewis. But
true, there is also him in there, which is a pretty big deal, which I can understand as well.
I drink your milkshake.
You said that you thought that his shorts are better than this.
Yeah.
I haven't seen them yet, the shorts, the Doug Nicholas story, and what's it? Was it Coffee and Cigarettes?
Yeah, that's it.
Fact check Norris.
Fact check Norris here. It sounds like Barb was about to give the right title for the short, Cigarettes and Coffee, when Ruth cut them off, which is kind of stupid. Coffee and Cigarettes, though, is also the name of 3 shorts made by Jim Jarmusch, which he also combined into one large feature film. Fact check Norris out.
Yeah, those two. I mean, I've seen third copy bootleg VHS turned on YouTube. So they're on YouTube and very.
They look like they're ripped off VHS or something.
But a third bootleg copy of some kind. It's really kind of crappy. Yeah. But I've seen that, and he's in those shorts, especially Coffee and Cigarettes, is very good at creating an atmosphere. A kind of he takes a place in this short. It's the diner. It's a diner, and it's just the conversation. You go from table to table,
Yeah.
It lasts, I think it's like 20 something minutes, and you just go from conversation to conversation, and he manages to really, I mean, in my opinion, I felt like I could have been like, I don't know, the waiter in the diner, and I'm witnessing all those absolutely either very like normal or very weird conversations, especially at the beginning of it, where it's like table to table, which I think is very, like, it's very fun. And I think it was a very good precursor to what he then put on the table, which is managing to, in a scene, create enough of a small world that it can be self-contained.
Yeah.
Which is like so interesting. And now he's branched out a lot into like music videos, especially for AIM.
Yeah.
And even in those music videos, I saw it recently, 2 days ago, so Valentine, which is like 3 performances of AIM that he filmed back to back in a studio. And even just that, it's so very simple. It goes from one of the AIM sisters to the other, and we see them just playing live music. It's, not very interesting in itself, but he manages to really create an atmosphere and kind of a little world in which those people can just be, and that's enough.
Yeah.
And I think that's very, I don't know, that's very interesting and very characteristic of his work. Or most of his work up to Phantom Thread, really.
Well, that turns into something that struck me while I was rewatching Phantom Thread this time, which is something that I also felt when I watched Licorice Pizza. You have loads of these directors who have a very clear style, and that bleeds into the performances of the actors. For instance, Wes Anderson, there's a very dry delivery for all the actors, which is very much in tune with the world. Whereas I feel that in Phantom Thread and Licorice Pizza, there's more a sense of I do think that Paul Thomas Anderson knows exactly what he wants from his actors, but there is a very big sense of he lets them cook, he lets them explore stuff, and there's not like a very unified sense of what they should look like or how they should behave. But Joaquin Phoenix in his movies is very different from Daniel Day-Lewis in one of his movies. They have their own accents, their own things that they bring to the table, and it's just amplified by the things that Paul Thomas Anderson does. It's not like it's being held in a certain cage.
No, I really agree that they... I mean, it also, you can see how much he enjoys also working with people that have not necessarily done films before. Like, especially like with Pizza, like both of those actors are new to acting. So I think he... Like
Alana Haim and Cooper...
Yeah, same
Hoffman.
Yeah. Okay. So I think he also likes to see actors be like owning their craft, or like discovering their craft in his films.
Yeah.
So that's very true, that you can see that they can do whatever they want. And that might be actually why those performances are usually so good as well. It's like, do whatever, but do it well. And it's what happens. Like, I don't think there is a very bad performance in any of his films. Like, they're either good or brilliant.
Yeah. Sometimes you get people who aren't really actors, like Alana Haim, and who haven't been actors before. Let's just say it that way instead of because clearly they're actors now. But there's a very big sense of authenticity, but also people who have very big techniques in how they approach things. They're still served by the way he directs.
Yeah. No,
even a British actor with a lot of technique, like Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah, no, it's quite... I mean, that says a lot about Anderson as a director, of how he can do things, but it also means that he can deal with people that are very method and people that are not, which, I mean, I think for some directors, someone would be either very method or very new to acting could be very challenging. But he seems to be dealing with it very well. I don't think that's any of his... I mean, I don't know how he manages everything on set. We're not there. But he seems, at least as a director, in regards to his actors, seems to be doing it a pretty good job.
Yeah, very
thus
much
far.
so. Seems like they have like a very equal relationship. Like he involves his actors that much into the creative process instead of saying that I need to get this from you.
Yeah, no, I mean,
But that's the way it comes across on the screen. I can't say if that's really true because I don't know his way of working. But
yeah, that's true. I have no idea. I've never actually looked at like many interviews with him or such. That's not like there are some people that I'm fascinated and I watch like everything they say, but he's one of those people that I'm kind of okay staying a mystery a bit for some reason.
Well, he also doesn't give that many interviews, and when he does give interviews, he is very mysterious. He doesn't like to explain himself and stuff like that. So he sort of reacts to the interviewers okay, that's your observation. Now that's all right, but it's not. If you see that, that's okay. But he just makes interviewers feel stupid about themselves and about their very astute observations most of the time, which is a very cool thing to watch sometimes, but it's also very weird. Some of the interviews in which he has the best equal footing with an interviewer is when they talk about other stuff.
Fair enough.
There's this podcast, the Adam Buxton podcast, where he's just vibing with a comedian, and they're exploring how much they like the work of Jim Carrey and stuff like that, which you might not expect from Paul Thomas Anderson. He's also apparently a big fan of Venom. Let There Be Carnage, which he watched with his children.
That's good.
So it's part of the viewing experience, but he just had a streak to like crap and be okay with that. Just go, yeah, it's just what I like.
I get it. I do sometimes enjoy a very crappy film for the sake of it being absolutely terrible. So,
but also comes across in a sense of humor a lot of the times.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's fun. That makes him quite a human person. I do enjoy directors that don't take themselves so very seriously all the time, or don't make comments that will belittle other like productions or other way of going about cinema. Like I was seeing this like Scorsese saying like superhero movies are not movies and stuff, and you're like, man, like
well, it's not necessarily what he said. He said it's not cinema. It's not high cinema art.
But like it's like kind of like I am kind of better than you are, and Anderson being like, I loved Venom, even though it got the most awful reviews, is telling you, okay, it's like he's a man that can appreciate many certain things that.
There's a very big level on which I enjoyed Venom as well.
I understand.
Just the whole
I get it. I mean, that's part of those films that I kind of see as very campy. Like they are.
It is completely ridiculous.
Exactly. Like you just take it as what it is. Just it's fine.
Yeah. So I also asked you if you had any improvements. What would make Phantom Thread a better movie?
Yeah.
Improvemtasio.
What would you say?
So I'd say putting the end in the middle and then developing that would have been awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think having everything that's so based on the senses a bit more, I don't know, made in a way that you can actually feel them. So it becomes a bit more mimetic to like a
bit more vibrant.
Yeah, like something that, when he eats food that you can kind of imagine what it would taste like, or when he touches fabrics, I wish I could feel it, and I couldn't, and it's quite frustrating at times when you have all those things, or when the Cyril is like smelling Alma, which actually that might explain the queer subtext, but like when she's really like smelling her and like identifying smells, you see her do it, but you're not there to try and smell. As that's those moments that really build distance, where these people are in their world with sensations that they can feel, but we do not as an audience have access to them, even though we kind of could if thematically it was a bit different. So those are really
you could have had like a bit more of a close-up of just her nose going.
Yeah, like there was moments where I wished it was the sensation became sensual.
Yeah.
Like I could.
It sort of lacks texture.
Yeah, and it's very clean. It's very. I wish there was a bit more of that. Really.
I understand that. But so you would have liked to have like Alma and Reynolds versus the world of fashion.
Oh, that would have been
like
so fun.
vignettes, just moving from Barbara Rose to another very messed up character, slapping the hell out of everyone. And,
I mean, not necessarily that, but like intersect moments where of like calm, where you can see like that tenderness and things that they kind of develop when he's sick. But like,
yeah.
like
and them just being sort of like a Bonnie and Clyde in the fashion world.
Yeah, be toxic and own up to it. Embrace it. Be toxic. Well, yeah, that's really those
feed each other.
Yeah.
All right. And I also asked you for 3 movie recommendations.
Yes.
So I'm very curious to see what have you got in store for us.
Okay.
And is it all festival related
One
or
of
not?
them is.
Tip 1!
So one of them is Obscene, which is a short experimental documentary from 2021 by director Paloma Castro. It's Argentinian, and it explores texts about sexuality at large and its relationship with the construction of pornographic images. And it kind of, what is very interesting in this is that she deconstructs all those pornographic images, and she creates kind of a small fake theater with kind of slides that she plays with. And that to me was the best short that I've seen this year. It's playing in a retracing memory session at Lighter Shorts, so you should check it out. It's very good. It's all it's really good.
Tip 2!
And then the other 2 are not short films, but are short related.
Okay.
The other one is The Wild Boys by Bertrand Mandico, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. I saw it in high school, and I will never forget it. It's completely super strange story. Basically 5 boys commit a crime. They're exiled to a weird island, which is super like jungle-like, completely insane. And the colors are great. The world is completely strange. It's just a very strange experience that I recommend people go through. But the reason why I love it so much is because I discovered Mandico through short films as well. And he's made, again, the weirdest thing, like a lot of nonsensical, very it's shorts very much about texture, about like creating sensation, nonsensical stories, very odd characters, and you're just kind of thrown there and you're like, I'm trying to understand and I don't get it, which I truly, truly love. So it's like his love for short films is what got me to like find him, and then this film, which is absolutely awesome.
Yeah. This is the kind of recommendation I like. This sounds really good.
It's very, very strange. Highly recommend. 10 out of 10.
Tip 3!
And then the last one is Bad Luck Banging or Loony Porn, which by
that's one that I haven't seen yet.
It's really good. It's about an history teacher in Romania. She films a sex tape with her husband that ends up online, and her students end up finding it. So it becomes a whole ordeal at school. Like, can we keep this teacher now that her sex tape is online? And it's kind of an excuse to explore sexism, nationalism, consumerism in Romanian society today. It's very weirdly done with acts. Like it really experiments a lot with the medium, which is super interesting. The story is really out there. Like nobody's heard of that, so, which kind of keeps you involved, because you're like, what is this? And he actually also makes a lot of short films. I haven't seen many of them, but the one he made this year, Semiotic Plastics, is also in our festival. And it's really good, highly a bit experimental retelling of the circle of life.
Yeah.
Highly recommend in our microcosm session, this one.
Okay, very good. Good to have that. Yeah. I haven't seen Bad Luck Banging or Loony Porn yet. I do understand that if people don't like it, they can sometimes become very angry about it. So I think that makes it even more worth the gamble. Yeah. Just go in there and feel something.
Yeah, I mean, you either love it or hate it. I think there is no in between. Yeah. But it can't leave you indifferent. You can't leave the room and be like, I didn't care about this. It didn't do anything for me. It will trigger emotions of all kinds.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
And so we fought and we battled, yes, we beat each other up. Both of us tried hard, we both failed. Yes, I had you by the thumbs, but neither of us won. Only the love for cinema prevailed.
And that, as they say, is that. Thank you so much for listening. Even more thanks to Barb for being available so quickly to have a chat about Phantom Thread. And also thanks to Ida, who does PR for Leiden Shorts, for getting in touch to get this podcast on the road. Now, are there any movies I've seen the last 2 weeks that I can recommend? Of course. That movie you've heard so many good things about, Everything Everywhere All at Once, I can only confirm that yes, it is some lovely multiverse madness. Michelle Yeoh and Kiwi Kwan are both awesome in it, and well, it delivers on many fronts. Another film I saw on recommendation of Peter Verstraeten, who you've heard in the podcast before, is Illustrious Corpses, or to call it by its original Italian title, Cadaveri Eccellenti, which paints a very rotten state in the Italian justice system of 1976. It builds a whole world of oppressive injustice, with some fine Italian performances by Fernando Rey and Max von Sydow. And another film I saw is Ali and Eva. If you've seen the trailer, you might expect a very, romantic comedy-ish British drama. It sort of is, but it really isn't. Director Cleo Barnard has turned it into something which goes way deeper than just that. This is social realism infused with some very good subjective filmmaking. And both the lead actors, Claire Rushbrook and Adil Akhtar, they just bring so much to the table. They're brilliant at this. Anyway, so that's it. This was a cinema production. Hosted and edited by me, which is Ruud, de 20ste Eeuwse Vos, and with lovely jingles by the genius, that is Roy Grutters. This podcast has also been made possible by our patrons, Casey the Great, Martijn van Koolwijk, Ed Huisman, the Holy Saint, Niels Timmer, and Onno Lubbers of the Dial Q4 Movie Quiz. Do you also want to become a patron? Then quickly go to patreon.com/duimpjeworstelen. Find out how and what you get if you do. You can also find us on social media, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd. And if you have some lovely, juicy, steaming hate mail for me, then please send it to duimpjeworstelen@gmail.com. That is it. Thanks so much for listening. See you again in 2 weeks. And of course, a very big bye-bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, could we have an enormous round of applause, please, for our host, who has once again succeeded in bringing to us a plethora of top-notch, cinematographically themed entertainment. We have had an absolute ball, have we not? Next time on Thumb Wrestling.
En zoals ook er ooit is geschreven over de Azteken, die verwachten dat er een white savior kwam vanuit de zee. Dus toen Cortés kwam als conquistador, ja, dat moest dan wel. Dat zijn ook...
Quetzalcoatl was het volgens mij.
Juist.
Misschien dat ik het niet goed uitspreek, maar...
En dat is...
Volgens mij klopt het wel.
Dus niet alleen is dat Azteekse verhaal ontkracht. Ze dachten natuurlijk niet dat die witte mensen die daar met geweren kwamen hun gingen redden en naar het paradijs gingen brengen. zo ook is dit wat moeilijk te geloven... dat ze daadwerkelijk zo staan te juichen... om uitgebuit te worden door een ander persoon.
This podcast employs a strict only like and subscribe if you really want to policy. Okay, bye.